usually on 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, but I'm here an hour early today. Being the internet, I can do it anytime I want, which is a great gift for this particular venue. Harold Hervey is with me. He's a former candidate from the Constitution Party.
Conservative Party.
The Conservative Party. Thank you. I thought it was the Constitution Party. Harold, what is the deal with the Conservative Party? Are they not the Republican branch of the Republican Party?
No, not actually. The Conservative Party was founded about 10 years ago, specifically to get away from the Republican Party, because Republicans had consistently failed to meet their campaign promises and consistently failed to be conservative as they always campaigned on and promised. And so people, real conservatives like me and obviously a number of other people, decided that it was time for a new party, a party that was conservative, top to bottom, A to B, and that wasn't populated by rhinos and many other things that plagued the Republican Party. So we formed the Conservative Party, and we had a nice growth spurt for a while. Unfortunately, we ran into the Tea Party. The Tea Party and the Conservative Party essentially started about the same time.
I see.
And the Tea Party did a much better job of recruiting and growing than we did. We were limited by finances and growing pains and all sorts of things. And many of the people who would naturally have come to the Conservative Party temporarily stayed with the Tea Party. Of course, the Tea Party had a fundamental flaw in that it was united. The people who joined it were united for fiscal issues. The Tea Party ran on the idea of taxing enough already. Okay, so they were really upset about the Obamas and the government spending, and so they were mostly united by fiscal issues. That includes liberals, moderates, Democrats, Republicans, and conservatives. They were all united by fiscal issues. But because there was only one main thing keeping them together, fiscal issues, they couldn't really grow into a cohesive, solid party, because you need to talk about more things than just money when you're a party. And as a result, gradually the Tea Party faded into obscurity. For that reason, and the fact that there were so many of them, they split apart and failed to coalesce around a central core leadership.
Well, I think that it's a trend in American history that third parties either tend to be co-opted by one of the two main parties, or they become the main party. I mean, we could go back to the anti-Masonic Party, which became basically the Whigs, and then the Whigs would eventually become the Republicans. The progressives would take over the Democratic Party. I mean, these are, third parties that have issues that resonate with people, and then they're co-opted. And I think that to a certain extent, that both the Tea Party and the Conservative Party were co-opted by President Trump, who I think was truly a conservative and governed as a conservative.
Sure. The Conservative Party officially, during that election cycle, when Trump was a candidate, we actually endorsed Ted Cruz. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sure. But we gave a really heavy-duty nod in second place to Donald Trump, because Ted Cruz was a known commodity. He was really a well-known, solid conservative from day one. But there were some doubts about Donald Trump.
Well, sure.
He was in New York City. He did business with the Clintons and all that kind of stuff. But Ted Cruz was known. But when I wrote in the nomination or the endorsement content that while Ted Cruz is our number one choice, we give a strong nod to Donald Trump. We just have a few reservations. One of which is that we believe that he could be swayed by compliments and criticism too much. Mm-hmm. I said that Trump loves compliments like a fat girl likes chocolate cake. But it turned out to be that that was somewhat true, because he got moved around very easily by compliments or criticism. Right. So when Cruz dropped out, we endorsed Trump.
Okay, and I also would note that yes, Trump seems to like the personality element, but he also had consistent positions that go back to in his public career by 30 years. I mean, he did not want America's involvement in perpetual wars around the world. He wanted to make America great. He believed in strengthening our trade relations. He wanted conservative values. He wanted limited government and reducing regulations. And he actually did a lot of that. I mean, if you look at his administration, it's incredibly successful, especially
Absolutely.
given the assault that he was under by this cockamamie conspiracy idea that he was spying for Russia and all this
Yes.
crap that he had to put up with for 4 years. So now here we are moving into the midterms.
And as you before that in this wonderful book
Thank
you
you.
have, yeah, I read it, and I see Trump
Appreciate
here.
that.
And I agree with you. No, I agree with you on one thing. I agree with Trump's initiatives. 95% of his initiatives and policies, I agree with wholeheartedly.
Sure.
It's his behavior that could cause him the problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's known to be somewhat rude and crude, and that turns some people off. I personally love that, but whatever. Here we are, 2020 election. We can't talk about it because we're on YouTube. That's verboten. But we can talk about the upcoming midterms. I believe that Republicans, and when I say Republicans, I'm talking MAGA Republicans, are going to have a historic victory that's going to change the course of our politics and our history for the next generation in both the Senate and House. But I am concerned about several things. The first one is the thing we can't talk about, but everybody knows what I'm getting at in terms of what happened in 2020 and some of the various aspects of that election, which we can't talk about. Those aspects are still in place and they're still happening. And in fact, they just happened, I would argue, in the Georgia primary with this guy Raffensperger, who was despised and hated by conservatives for reasons we can't talk about because of our censorship. He won suddenly miraculously overnight. All right, I'm not going to go any further than that, other than to say that I'm concerned about this apparatus in place right now. And that's the only way that this could not happen, in my opinion. The other possibility, which we have to ponder, is some kind of an event between now and election day, which is going to get everyone's attention away from the election. God knows what it could be. Maybe they'll launch a new pandemic. I don't know. But what do you think is going to happen, Harold, in terms of the upcoming midterm?
Well, obviously, that 2020 election still looms large in the hearts of many MAGA Trump supporters. But it is, in fact, I believe, a detriment to run on that, to focus on that. I think the Republican Party would be wise to keep that debacle 2020 election in their back of their minds, be vigilant and aware of these things, of voter fraud, and to be
Don't say that
on
word.
top of things.
That word is to get us in trouble. The F word. Just say the F word.
What's that? What's the F word?
The voter F.
Oh yeah. Not for me. I'll talk exactly what I want. That's why I'm not a Republican.
I know, and also we have to worry about these little Nazis that run YouTube. I mean, they're going to look at that and
but Charles, the political landscape for Republicans across the spectrum are so wonderful, so strong, so much low-hanging fruit that we can take advantage of and thrive on, that we don't have to focus on 2020. We can focus on the key things that people are worried about now, everyone. And I'm getting ready to release my platform for Republicans, which includes the key things that Republicans can focus on and win on without doubt, without hesitation. The first thing is Republicans have to be not worried about fighting the culture wars. Culture war issues are the ones that are going to bring us over the top. Illegal immigration, CRT, wokeism, reparations, all these things, and those two things alone will be enough to sway us. The economy, obviously, Biden's inflation, not Putin,
Right.
Biden. And those things are enough at this stage. And of course, crime wave. All those things are strictly 100% Democrat owned. And I want the Republican Party and Republicans of all sorts to focus on those things, because the Democrats own them, and they cannot in any way avoid them. They can't duck those. They own them 100%. We focus on those things and not be worried and not be afraid about those things. Talk about abortion, talk about illegal immigration, talk about crime and inflation, all those things, CRT, wokeism, those things will get us over the top easily.
Oh, I agree. And the Democrats are terrified over the horrendous ratings that Biden has. I mean, it's like something like 20%, and about 5% support his handling of the economy. And even to the point where Stacey Abrams in Georgia didn't want to appear on stage with Biden when he showed up. And more recently, Ryan from what's his name, from Ohio refused to come. You know, when their own president is in town for a rally, and they're like, she's busy having her hair done. So that tells you everything. I agree with you about those being the primary issues. I slightly disagree with you in that we should not stop talking about 2020. That should still be there. We have to say what we think happened and continue to say it, whether they like it or not. If they don't like it, they can suck on it. That's just my opinion on that. Do you think that the decision by the Supreme Court to turn abortion regulation back where I frankly think it belongs, and that is with the states, do you think that's going to shake things up? And if so, how?
It could very well, Charles, because up until that leaked decision, and then, of course, the subsequent ruling on abortion, the Democrats were disorganized, disheartened, had a low morale because they were getting, the polls are just showing there was no lifeline for them. This ruling, unfortunately, even though it's correct, has now energized Democrats. They now have something they can hang their hats on. And before they had nothing, now they have this. It won't ultimately change the total outcome. In other words, I believe that instead of winning 30 seats in the House, Republicans may win 25 instead because of this abortion thing. Instead of winning 3 Senate seats, they may win 2 because possibly of the abortion thing, because Democrats are going to use it as a way to energize women. But now Republicans cannot shy away from this. And this is one of the reasons why I always worry about Republicans. They tend to cower and shy away from fighting this war. People say, well, Democrats and media say this is a lack of taking rights away. Republicans have to point out, no, your rights have not eroded. Your rights have increased because we pushed the decision making down to your level as opposed to the federal level. So they have to be able to manage it and not be afraid to say the decision enhances democracy. It doesn't retard democracy. I worry Republicans won't have the courage to do that.
Well, whether they do or not, that does seem to be de facto what's happened. I mean, there was like a 2 or 3 day wringing of hands and brouhaha and protest, but now it seems like people are realizing that abortion rights are with the states and that people who want them regulated are getting them regulated. There isn't this cataclysmic event, it's still there, and that the demagoguery around it has not really taken hold. I mean, I think plus the left has overstepped itself, as they always do, showing up with a bomb at Judge Kavanaugh's house, showing up, pouring red blood paint on the state house, steps, insurrection in Arizona. They've overplayed their hand as they usually do, and I think it's not a good look for them. Some of the people out protesting for abortion, and doing so in a way that they love abortion, that's not a good look. Most people in America aren't at that place. And I think that ultimately it's going to be a moderate issue. Abortion will remain legal in the states, but regulated, which is where I think most Americans are.
Right, exactly. Most Americans believe in democracy, and this ruling pushes democracy, enables democracy where it belongs. down at the state level. That's what the founders wanted. This is a republic of the United States, a republic of states that are united under a common constitution. Letting the states make these decisions is good. The question is, will the Republicans have the what do you call it, the courage and the wherewithal and the ability to manage that correctly? I hope they do, because all the other things that are going on are, so they have the wind in their sails. They just have to make sure they don't stumble on this abortion issue.
And of course, the other issue that the Democrats are bringing up in a very stark way is these mass murderers who are showing up, like the guy in Highland Park, Illinois, putting aside the fact that he was, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and he was an Antifa guy apparently, and he was into the occult, and I think he was a transsexual. Putting that aside, he had a huge gun, and people are saying that those guns should be banned. It puts Republicans in a very difficult position. So what do you think is going to happen with that? How is that going to come down?
Every time one of these tragedies occurs, going all the way back to Sandy Hook, I hear all the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. But then gradually, all this heat without light gradually abates. And I wrote an editorial about this. I said the biggest reason why we don't have any meaningful gun control, number one, the Second Amendment. People who don't, the Second Amendment exists, and that's the way it is. If you don't like if you don't like the way guns are being distributed or handled, change the amendment, change the Second Amendment. But the fact is, the Democrats and the liberals created their own mess because they created such a toxic environment, and the way they talk to us, the way they talk to gun owners, the way they manage and call us names and create such a hostile environment, they'll never get anything done because people react negatively to us. And they say, I walking down the street last week, and there was this people having, anti-gun placards on the street, and they called it, all kinds. Well, do you support that? Yes, and they call it all kinds of names. You low down person. You're a gun-toting, knuckle-dragging Trump supporter. You're now going to rot in hell. Oh, would you please sign my petition? And so those their messaging is counterproductive. Mm-hmm. And then the other problem with the anti-gun people is that people begin to realize is that the same people who want gun control are the very people who want to defund the police. The same people who want strict gun controls are the ones that support cash bail and lack of criminality.
Right, they don't want to prosecute.
What they do is they want to prosecute police instead of the criminals. They want to handcuff police, but not the criminals. And so these things are always there. They spike during one of these tragedies, but gradually they go down. Having said that, there is room for discussion about having background checks. I think that there's no harm in having background checks and having effective background checks. We may have been able to catch this nutcase and other nutcases, and they're waving all these red flags before they do it.
And they were already on the radar of police, and yet they were able to go out and buy a gun, even though in the case of this Highland Park guy, he had already had weapons confiscated by the police. He'd already been threatening, doing illegal activities like sending threats.
The ACLU, who
same thing with the guy in
gun
Buffalo.
Laws.
Yeah,
the ACLU, who supports gun laws, would be the very first to attack the police if the police would have arrested this kid and for questioning beforehand.
That's right, and as usual, the left overplays its hand when you have President Biden come out right after the I think it was the Buffalo or Uvalde, and saying, well, we have to ban handguns. In other words, he shows the radicalism of a left that wants to disarm the 99.9% of Americans who are law-abiding and who legally have a gun, who know how to use it, and who understand that this is a basic right and a constitutional right. So
exactly, it is a constitutional right.
Indeed, and I think they overplay their hand, and the demagoguery is something that is not a good look for them when they do that. So, yeah.
The idea is that we know as conservatives and articles, Second Amendment advocates, that the liberals and the media don't want to just stop at background checks. They want to go to the next step, and then they're going to ban assault rifles. And then they're going to ban magazines, and then they're going to ban pistols. So we know what their agenda is. You know, Beto O'Rourke in his ill-fated gubernatorial campaign said, "Hell yes, we're going to take your guns." He said it outright.
Right.
And so people who want to preserve their Second Amendment rights are very leery of this concept of boiling the frog. You know, you gradually just think about what they did with smoking. First, they banned smoking in the airplane sections. Then they banned smoking in the whole airplane. And now you can't smoke anywhere. That's the same thing was going to happen.
I actually support that, but let's put that aside.
Yeah. I agree. But that's the point is that.
But that's how they do it. It's a good example. And, you know, it's a gradual thing. And they're not addressing the more prescient social issue regarding these mass murderers. You know, they say, well, there are too many guns. There used to be a lot more accessibility to guns. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you could buy a gun over the counter at Woolworths, and without just as long as you showed your ID and you were that a certain age. And so it is not as accessible, and that there hasn't been a reasonable study done, a sociological study of all of these people who are committing these mass murders, going back to you know, Columbine and everyone else, to see if there's some similarities in terms of what's going on with them, what they believe in. Are they on psych drugs, for example, where you read the fine print and it says this drug can lead to homicide? They're all on that drug. I guarantee it. Every one of them is on that drug.
You know, Charles, there's a common thread that runs through all these people who did these things. And that's simply that they're crazy. That's
right. Mental illness.
They're crazy.
Why are they not being
and if we impose all these gun laws, restrictions that the liberals and the media want us to do, the only people that will have guns are the people who don't care about laws and the crazy ones like that.
And they're out on the street because I think there was a federal judge back during the Reagan years, actually, who made it unlawful for them to be confined to mental hospitals where they should be, frankly.
Yes.
And these are people that everyone knew was crazy. The case of the Uvalde guy, he was traveling around with dead cats in a bag in the street. I mean, this guy in Highland Park, known to be crazy. I mean, known to be threatening. Same thing with the guy in Buffalo. He had threatened his high school. Like, his nickname was School Shooter. I mean, these are people that were on the radar screen as dangerous and as mentally unstable people. They should have been committed, or they should have at least been, you know, observed and not allowed to gain weapons.
And I promise you, Charles, that if people would have done that, the local authorities would have taken these people and committed them. The very same people who are calling for restrictions on gun will cry that they were violating their civil rights.
Well, Harold, you bring up obviously a very important point, in that this is part of a breakdown of law and order when you have George Soros-backed DAs like Chesa Bowden in San Francisco, who are openly declaring that they're not going to prosecute criminals and are not. Right. And it's also racist because they're not prosecuting criminals in Black neighborhoods who have committed murders. They're letting them out. They're ignoring these crimes. They're not investigating. So, you know, these are the same people, these law and order, you know, deniers, who are then complaining and ripping out their hair when this happens.
Yes.
Anyway, so I hope that Republicans can phrase these issues in that way, because I think that'll resonate with people. I think that we could look for a model on how this election should go to the election in Virginia, where Youngkin was elected and where the first Black woman was elected lieutenant governor since Reconstruction. And that was that he fielded, along with the Republican National Committee.
This is Youngkin you're talking about?
Youngkin, yeah, Greg Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin. He fielded thousands of people to man the voting booths, be present when in the counting rooms, when the absentee ballots were counted. He fielded a team of lawyers who were on call in case there was anything that looked like an impropriety, and they were ready to step in on a dime to stop it. And it was a brilliant model, and it was financed both by the Republican National Committee, which knows goddamn well what happened in the last election, even though they won't talk about it publicly, and Youngkin. And it worked well. It worked fantastically. It was probably the most honest election in Virginia since Thomas Jefferson, actually. I mean, and I think that we need to see that in all 50 states. My sense is that there is a movement like that. There is the organizations, grassroots organizations, where you have people signing up to man the polls and to work, to run for local election boards.
Yes.
And I urge people to do that. You could be a retired person, a teenager, somebody who has maybe a little extra time on your hands. You want to do something to help your country and do something to get involved. Get involved in your local precinct election politics. Get into this, because that's what's going to save us.
All politics is local.
Indeed.
And you're 100% right, because you mentioned the movement. This movement can be manifested and can be seen easily in liberal cities like LA, where they're going to recall the district attorney for not enforcing the laws. They got 714,000 signatures to remove this clown. And then this guy Bragg in New York. Today, right. I read that
Krasner in Philadelphia.
Krasner in Philadelphia, yes, yeah. And this guy Bragg in New York. Today I read a story where he jailed this old man who killed the guy who was attacking him, but he let other criminals who are assault with deadly weapons and burglaries with armed work. He let them go, but he jailed a poor old man who defended himself and killed the guy who was attacking him. So the reverse, it's you read about it, it's insane. So and of course here in California, of all places, we have this movement by the Republicans and even parts of Democrats who are urging moderates to run for school boards to eliminate or to stop the CRT wokeism in schools. The liberals and the Democrats are trying to teach children gender fluidity instead of math.
Right.
It's a tragedy.
It's an agenda.
Using schools as a indoctrination. So I think that really is very interesting, Charles. You brought up the movement. Of all places, it's a guy, a liberal author out of San Francisco, and I forgot his name right now, but his book is called San Francisco.
Oh yes, I've seen him. He's good.
Yeah, where he says, and why do liberals always ruin cities? And he's a liberal. He lives in San Francisco. And I urge people to take a look at that book. And it's a little heavy reading at the beginning, a little too much statistics. But the bottom line is, liberals run cities because they're blinded by their ideology instead of common sense. And this book by a liberal tells you why liberals do that. And the biggest, most obvious example of what happens in liberal cities is Portland, Oregon.
Indeed.
Last year, they voted to legalize hard drugs like crack, fentanyl, marijuana, all these other drugs, speed, these things that I don't know them all. But now the whole city is turning into a cesspool, a shooting gallery, people dying in the streets, living in the streets. It's a total disaster. The whole city of Portland is gradually dying leaps and bounds because they're overrun by drug addicts who come there and they die in the streets. Liberalism.
It's almost enough to make some of these cities become conservative. I would suggest that people don't need to say it out loud, but think about it when you go back, when you're going to vote, assuming that there is still a free vote in your state, and I don't assume that. So
I want to give you and your audience some food for thought.
Please.
I'm beginning to believe, Charles, that these liberal leftist CRT-driven policies are purposely designed to undermine and degrade America on purpose. and because people understand, liberals who are doing this on purpose understand that demographics is destiny, and that liberals are trying desperately to undermine and degrade our demographics to hurt America from within on purpose.
Oh,
That's my thought.
I don't think it's, I think it's manifest, it's manifest, it's it's observable. I mean, and it's quite clear,
Yeah.
and yet they're doing it at this point in a generational sense. They've been controlling these cities, and they're corrupt political machines. So Harold, where can people reach you if you want to give out a website? What are you
Sure.
working on? Tell me where we can read your articles.
Yes, I work under the nom de plume New Centurion, SPQA. That is for the Senate.
Isn't that from the Latin, right? You're freezing up on me. That's okay, Harold. Okay, so we're just getting a little bit of a freeze here. Harold Hervey, SPQA. I think it's a Latin New Centurion reference. Harold, I want to thank you for joining me. We're having a little bit of a computer freeze here. Thanks for joining me, everyone. God bless you all. Please check out my books. They're available at Amazon Books. Charles Moscowitz. I've got 20 nonfiction books there. My latest is The Biden Coup. Check it out. I am even afraid to say that word on YouTube, but there it is. And God bless you. God bless this country. Thank you very much.